They said the dead don't move after midnight. So why did I hear breathing inside my coffin before the sun came up? The frost bit through my gloves as I knelt beside the open grave, my breath rising in slow, pale clouds. Around me, the world was silent, except for the creak of frozen wood and the soft hiss of the wind slipping between gravestones. Every coffin I'd opened that morning was empty, clean, untouched, like the earth had never known its dead. But one still waited for me. My own name was carved across its lid, the letters shallow and shaking, as if written by someone in a hurry or in fear. I stared at it, heart hammering like a trapped bird, feeling the weight of the dawn pressing down on my shoulders. The horizon burned with pale fire, yet everything inside me turned colder. The shovel slipped from my hands when I heard it. A muffled sigh from beneath the lid, weak but human, pleading to be heard. And then came the whisper, close enough to fog the air above the seal. "You're late." The graveyard was never meant to breathe. Yet the ground pulsed beneath my boots like a sleeping heart. I stumbled through the rows of open graves, the empty coffins, gaping like mouths mid-scream. No footprints but mine marked the snow. No signs of theft or decay, just a silence too thick to belong to morning. Every grave I'd buried this winter was here, open and hollow. Names of the lost whispering against the icy wind. I tried to call out, but my voice froze halfway through the word. The sound died where it began. The world felt paused, held in a pale breath between dawn and death. Then from somewhere beyond the fog came the faint clang of metal striking stone. I turned, heart pounding, to see a shovel wedged upright in the snow, its handle slick with blood that hadn't yet frozen. A flicker in the fog caught my eye, a lantern swinging low at the far gate, glowing like a dying ember. I thought I was alone, but the rhythm of that light said otherwise. I followed, boots crunching in shallow snow, every step sounding too loud in the stillness. The light bobbed and vanished behind a mausoleum, then reappeared, closer, too close. A voice drifted through the cold, hoarse, deliberate, speaking words I couldn't catch but felt deep in my bones. The fog parted, and there stood an old caretaker's figure, coat heavy with frost, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. He raised the lantern toward me, revealing eyes clouded like glass. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "They know your name now." He led me past the graves and into the hollow near the creek, where the ice shimmered like cracked glass. The air grew colder, heavier, until every breath stung my throat. "They wake when the ground remembers," he muttered, setting the lantern by the frozen water. Beneath the surface, something dark moved, a slow ripple pushing outward. I knelt, peering closer, my reflection trembling beside the shifting shadow. Then, faint and clear, a whisper echoed through the ice, repeating the same word again and again. My name. I stumbled back, the ground groaning as cracks spread in every direction, and from below the surface came a sound like knuckles rapping on wood. The lantern's flames sputtered as if gasping for air, and the wind fell dead. I turned to ask what was happening, but Jonas was gone. No footprints, no sound. Just empty snow where he'd stood. The ice under me had turned black, its surface pulsing with faint light from below. I heard it again. The breath, the same that came from my coffin. Only this time, it was behind me. I spun, heart slamming against my ribs, and saw the graves on the hill closing, each coffin lid falling shut one by one like doors, locking from the inside. The last sound was my name, whispered through the wind, followed by silence so deep it swallowed my scream. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the graveyard looked untouched again, every lid sealed, every mound smooth, as if the night had rewritten itself. I stumbled to the caretaker's shack, its door half buried in snow. Inside, the air stank of wax and iron. A single candle burned beside a leather-bound ledger, older than the frost itself. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Each page listed the dead, neat and dated, until the entries stopped halfway through the week before. The last line was still wet with ink, my name written in the same shaking hand that marked my coffin. Beneath it, a note in crimson: "Return before dawn or join them." The candle hissed, guttered, and went out. I pressed my hand to the page, trying to steady it, but the ink seemed to move beneath my palm. Letters curling like worms, twisting into new words. My breath fogged the paper as a low murmur rose from it, soft as breath, almost gentle. It spoke my name the way a mother might call her child. The sound came not from the room, but from beneath the floor. I backed away, every board groaning underfoot, and the ledger snapped shut on its own. The candle reignited, its flame a deep, unnatural red. I didn't dare run. The voice whispered once more, this time clear and cold: "You dug the wrong graves." Outside, the snow had stopped falling, and the world stood still. Then I saw them. Figures moving down the hill in single file, their motions stiff, their faces blurred by frost. Each one carried a shovel, silent and slow, leaving no footprints behind. My mind screamed to hide, but my body stayed frozen. Their heads turned as one, blank eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. I realized I recognized the coats, the boots, even the way one of them dragged his left leg. They were the dead I'd buried that winter, every one of them, walking back toward their graves. I followed them, drawn by something I couldn't explain. They stopped at the far edge of the cemetery, where the ground dipped into a hollow I'd never dug. There, in the untouched snow, waited a grave with no headstone, no marker, just a hole, shallow and waiting. One of the dead turned toward me, its mouth frozen open in a shape that almost formed a word. I took one step closer, and the shovel in its hands fell to the ground with a muffled thud. It pointed at the empty pit. My breath broke. The grave was already filled, with a man's body curled inside, wearing my coat. The air went thin. I dropped to my knees beside the pit, staring at myself frozen beneath the ice-crusted snow. My double's lips were blue, but his chest rose faintly, like a heartbeat struggling through frost. I leaned closer, half expecting the figure to vanish, but instead its eyes opened. Clouded white, unbleak mist slipped from its mouth. The whisper came again, not from the air but from within me. "You were never meant to dig. You were meant to remember." The ground shuddered, snow breaking apart, as unseen hands reached up from below, pulling me toward the grave. The ground swallowed me whole. Snow and soil folded over my body like a slow, deliberate breath, dragging me down into a tunnel slick with ice and roots. I clawed for light, but the world above had already vanished. A faint glow pulsed beneath the frozen earth, guiding me deeper, heartbeat steady and wrong. The sound of shovels echoed from all directions, metal striking stone in a rhythm that matched my pulse. I tried to scream, but the air pressed in, heavy with the scent of decay. Then, through the cold murk, I saw the others. Silhouettes of men buried long ago, digging in endless circles, their faces half gone, their mouths whispering names. One of them turned. It had my eyes. The tunnel widened into a vast chamber held together by ancient tree roots that glowed faintly, veins pulsing with slow light. Bones hung from them like ornaments, tangled in bark and ice. The air hummed with a low vibration that resonated through my ribs. I saw carvings etched into the roots, rows of names, the same ones from the ledger above, including mine, burned deep into the living wood. As I traced the letters, a sharp pain tore through my hand. The root beneath my fingers pulsed, and black sap seeped into my skin, snaking through my veins like ink alive. The whisper returned, softer this time inside my head. "The ground keeps what it's owed." From the far side of the chamber, something moved. A tall figure bound in roots, skin stretched thin and pale, face obscured by a mask of bark and bone. Its chest rose and fell, slow and deliberate, though no air seemed to enter it. The voice that followed was not spoken but felt, crawling through the marrow of my bones. "You dug what was forgotten," it said. "Now you must plant what remembers." The roots at its feet writhed, pulling a coffin from the soil. The lid slid open with a sigh, revealing nothing but loose earth and the echo of my own breath. "Lie down," it said, "before the others wake." The ground beneath me began to heave, slow and steady, as though the entire world drew breath. I felt the pull in my bones, the earth whispering through every heartbeat, promising warmth if I just let go. The air tasted of iron and rot, yet it carried something almost tender, an invitation. I sank to my knees, hands pressed into the soil. It felt alive, pulsing against my palms. Then I realized it was mimicking my breath, every inhale, every tremor. The chamber dimmed until only the glow from beneath remained. I looked up and saw hundreds of eyes in the walls, opening all at once. A violent shudder tore through the chamber. The walls split, and a flood of snow and light crashed down from above, hurling me back through the tunnel. I surfaced in the graveyard, gasping, half buried in frost and dirt. The dawn had turned gray, the world eerily still again. Every grave was sealed, every trace of digging erased. My hands shook as I brushed away the snow clinging to my coat. Beneath the ice on my skin, faint, dark veins pulsed like living roots. I stumbled to my feet, realizing the ground below still breathed. Only this time it was in rhythm with me. The light was wrong. Dawn should have brought warmth, but this one hung still and pale, like the sun was watching from far away. Every breath stung. Every shadow stretched too long. I staggered toward the chapel at the hill's edge, the only place left untouched by the frost. Its windows were black with ice, its door sealed shut by snow. As I brushed the frost from the door's handle, faint imprints appeared on the surface. Handprints, dozens of them, each sinking deeper into the wood as if reaching from the other side. The chapel bell began to toll without sound, the air vibrating like a heartbeat against my ribs. I pressed my ear to the door. Someone was whispering my name from the other side. When I stepped back from the chapel, the snow behind me shifted, small indentations forming words letter by letter, like invisible fingers were writing upon it. I knelt and brushed the powder aside. Beneath, a thin layer of frost mirrored my reflection, yet it wasn't me. The reflection smiled while I didn't. More names began to appear, spreading across the ground in a slow spiral. The names of the dead, the same ones I'd buried, looping inward toward the chapel's door. And at the center, drawn in a perfect circle, was my name again, written deeper than the rest, still forming as if the snow itself remembered every motion of my hand. The chapel bell began to swing on its own, moving slow and heavy, though no sound followed. Just the low hum of air trembling. I watched it through the frosted window, its movement hypnotic, every swing bending the light like ripples on water. My ears filled with pressure, the hum sinking deeper until it felt inside my skull. I pressed my palms to the glass and saw faint shapes moving in the bell's shadow, figures walking in reverse, as though time had bent itself to their steps. One by one they turned to face me, their faces blank as snow masks, and pointed toward the door. The silent tolling grew louder inside my chest until I realized it wasn't sound at all. It was my heartbeat. The chapel door cracked open on its own, a sigh of cold air spilling out like breath from a tomb. Inside, the floor was buried beneath snow, untouched except for one trail of footprints leading to the altar. The lantern from the caretaker hung there, its flame dim but alive. I followed the prints and stopped when I saw him, Jonas Cree, the old caretaker, standing still as ice, his eyes open but empty. The lantern flickered in his hand, flame bending toward me, like it recognized my breath. When I reached out, his mouth moved, not to speak, but to exhale. A thin line of frost escaped and formed words in the air. "You finished my grave." As I turned to leave the chapel, the light dimmed again, and something shimmered across the window. My reflection was still there, but it didn't move with me. It stood behind the glass, staring, lips parting in perfect silence. Then it reached out from the other side, pressing its frostbitten hand against the pane. I froze. It smiled faintly, then traced 3 words into the condensation between us. "You're the last." The glass cracked, spidering outward, as snow fell from the ceiling in a whispering storm. I stumbled back toward the door, but my reflection stayed, breathing, alive, and waiting where I should have been. The wind outside the chapel carried no sound, only vibration, like hundreds of distant voices humming beneath the snow. I stepped out, and the graveyard glowed faintly from below, light pulsing through the drifts in soft, rhythmic waves. I knelt, pressing my hand to the ice, and felt movement underneath. Slow, synchronized breathing. The air thickened until the fog itself seemed alive, curling around my face like fingers. From beneath the frozen earth came faint tolls, deep and uneven, like bells swinging in mud. The graves were ringing. One by one, the names carved on the headstones began to flicker, glowing from within their stone, until they all burned together in the same cold light that matched the veins in my hands. The tolling grew louder, not through the air, but through the ground itself. I could feel it in my bones, like the soil was vibrating through me. The sound built until the world seemed to shake, and then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. An expectant hush. The graves began to open, not by force but by release, lids rising slowly as if pushed from within. I watched as mist rose from each one, swirling upward into shapes half-formed, half-forgotten, faces I once buried, voices I once prayed over. They were speaking together now, their words overlapping until I understood one line clear as glass. "You rang the wrong bell." A shape emerged through the fog, tall, hunched, wrapped in tattered robes that trailed across the snow like shadows. In its hand swung a rusted bell, cracked, but still trembling with faint sound. The figure stopped before me, its face hidden behind a mask of corroded metal etched with tiny, unreadable names. I felt it before I heard it, the deep, hollow resonance that vibrated in my chest. "The bell doesn't wake the dead," it said. "It remembers who buried them." The figure lifted the bell and tilted its head. "And you buried yourself long before the frost." When it rang, the sound didn't move outward. It moved inward, straight into me. Oh, the ringing spread through my veins like fire, burning cold. My knees buckled, and the graves blurred into light. I clutched my chest, but the sound was already inside me, echoing through every breath. When I looked down, the frost on my coat shifted, shaping itself into words, one for every person I had buried. They crawled across my arms, my neck, my hands, until my entire body was a ledger written in ice. My voice broke as I tried to scream, but what came out wasn't sound. It was a chime. The bellmaker leaned closer, whispering with something like pity. "Now you remember." When the ringing finally stopped, the bellmaker was gone, and the graveyard stood still again. Silent, calm, almost ordinary. The snow had covered the graves once more, leaving no trace of what had risen. I looked down and saw the bell resting in the snow beside me, cracked and still warm to the touch. My reflection stared back from its tarnished surface. Not the man I was, but the hollow-eyed thing I'd become. The frost on my skin no longer pulsed. Instead, it rang faintly with every breath. I turned toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn struggled to break through the clouds, and I realized what the bell had taken. I was the only one left to answer it. The wind no longer bit. It whispered. It carried the faint sound of digging, though the graves were sealed tight. Every gust brought a murmur, words tangled in the snow, like the earth itself was trying to remember its last breath. I followed the sound to the edge of the graveyard, where the frost thickened into glass, smooth and black beneath the rising dawn. When I looked down, I didn't see my reflection this time. I saw the ground breathing, slow and steady, the rhythm matching my pulse. Beneath that glass layer of ice, a faint outline moved. A man curled on his side, sleeping soundly. Face turned toward mine. It was me again. The ice cracked as I knelt, each fracture like a whisper breaking open. I pressed my palm against the surface and felt warmth radiate from beneath. Impossible warmth. My reflection blinked back at me, slow and deliberate, and the world above began to fade. The snow darkened into shadow. The air turned thick, and suddenly I was on the other side of the ice, lying where the sleeping figure had been. I opened my eyes to a world of gray soil and heartbeat light. The sky above was no longer sky, but a ceiling of roots that pulsed in soft rhythm. Voices surrounded me. Low, patient, endless. They weren't calling my name anymore. They were humming lullabies for the dead. A figure emerged from the gray light. A woman cloaked in frost and shadow, her presence neither cold nor warm, but something older than both. Her eyes glowed faintly gold, calm, unblinking. Every gravedigger dreams of what they bury, she said. But you dug too deep. You woke the dream instead. Her words vibrated through the soil, each syllable stirring the roots above us. She reached out a hand of pale light, her fingers trailing smoke. The ground remembers pain, she whispered, but it forgets mercy. Lie still, and you may fade gently. Rise, and you'll carry its memory forever. I didn't answer. I only stared at her hand and reached back. The moment our hands touched, the world split open. A tremor shook the ground, and roots burst upward through the soil like veins of lightning. My lungs filled with dust and cold, my body dragged upward by unseen force. I saw flashes, faces of the dead, their eyes open in peace, their mouths whispering silent prayers. Then everything reversed. The graves sealed, the wind stilled, and the snow fell upward into the sky. I gasped. Breaking through the surface, back in the world above, the frost woman's voice lingered behind my eyes, soft and fading. Every grave dreams of its maker. The graveyard lay silent once more, calm beneath the light of a sun too weak to melt anything. My breath came slow, steady, the rhythm no longer my own, but shared with something deeper below. The names on the stones had faded, leaving smooth faces of ice. The bell was gone. The shovel was gone. Only the snow remained, soft as breath, undisturbed, but aware. I turned toward the horizon and saw faint shapes walking into the mist, each one carrying a shovel, moving toward a dawn that would never thaw. I knew then that I wasn't escaping. I was only joining the rhythm. The earth had stopped dreaming of me. Now, I was dreaming of it. It took me a moment to realize the silence was wrong. The air hung perfectly still. No wind, no frost, no sound of breath. The snowflakes that had always fallen around the graveyard now floated midair, suspended as if the world had forgotten gravity. I stepped forward and felt the crunch of nothing beneath my boots. The ground didn't move, yet it trembled in memory. Above me, clouds split apart in slow spirals, revealing a sky too white to be real. My body felt lighter, thinner, as if I were being erased by the same stillness. Then came the faintest echo, a single heartbeat that wasn't mine. I turned, and every gravestone was facing me. One headstone cracked open from its center with a sound like stones sighing. Inside wasn't darkness, but a thin slice of light, trembling as if alive. The hum beneath my feet deepened, and the snow began to pulse in slow, deliberate waves. Then the light formed words in the air above the grave. "You were never meant to bury us." My throat tightened, the air thick and electric. "You were meant to wake us." The ground beneath me split just wide enough for a hand to reach through. A pale, frost-bitten hand that held no weight yet gripped my ankle like memory itself. The clouds above folded inward, forming a vast hollow like an eye opening. A sound rolled across the sky, not thunder, not wind, but a low bell tone that vibrated through my chest and into the earth itself. The graves answered. Every mound began to hum, snow shivering in rhythm. The light from the cracked tomb rose upward, threads of frost weaving through the air until they formed a shape. An enormous bell suspended in the clouds, its surface made of frozen breath and mist. Each swing sent a pulse through the ground, melting the snow for just a second before it froze again. And with every toll, my heartbeat slowed to match. The snow released its grip, falling in slow motion once more. The graves fell silent, the bell fading to a faint hum that lingered behind my eyes. I stood before the last mound, the one that still bore my name, and felt an ache behind my ribs, a quiet pull. The shovel appeared beside me, its metal shining clean as new. I didn't remember picking it up, but my hands already knew what to do. Each strike into the frozen ground felt lighter, easier, as if the earth was helping. I dug until I found nothing. No coffin, no bones, just a hollow full of warm, swirling air. I leaned close, and a whisper rose from below. "Rest isn't below, Eli. It's behind you." I turned slowly, expecting to see the graveyard empty. Instead, every figure I'd buried stood in perfect stillness. Peaceful, eyes closed, shovels crossed over their chests. The air shimmered, the sky melting into soft gray. My heartbeat matched the quiet rhythm of the snow's fall. For the first time, I didn't feel the cold. I dropped the shovel, its echo swallowed by silence, and watched as the snow began to cover my footprints, smoothing everything clean. The frost in my veins stopped glowing. The graves stopped breathing. Above me, the bell dissolved into dawn, and when I looked down one last time, the ground no longer held my shadow.